You ever feel like you blink and suddenly there's this huge news story everyone's discussing?
Oh, definitely.
And you just want the core info, right? The real takeaways without like reading 50 articles.
Exactly. That's what we aim for here.
So today we're diving into something that's, well, it's certainly making waves.
It is. We're looking at the claims made in Original Sin. That's the new book by CNN's Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson from Axios.
Right. And it seems to focus pretty intensely on former President Joe Biden's fitness, mental and physical, during his time leading up to the election.
That's the core of it, yes.
So our mission today for you listening is pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the key arguments, the main anecdotes from this book, specifically as reported in a news article from yesterday, May 14th, 2025.
Think of it as your quick guide to understanding this whole narrative. We're just laying out what the article says the book claims. No judgments, just the information.
Okay, let's get right into it then. The central claim. What is it exactly?
Well, according to this summary of Original Sin, the main point is pretty blunt. The book argues Joe Biden's mental and physical state had declined to a point where he probably shouldn't have run for another term.
Shouldn't have run. Wow.
And importantly, it's just these concerns were, mostly ignored or maybe downplayed by Democrats.
Okay, that's a big assertion. So what specifics does the book, or rather the article about the book, point to? What examples are given?
The article highlights a few, and some are quite vivid. One involves a fundraiser back in June 2024.
Okay.
Apparently, at this event, President Biden needed to be told repeatedly who George Clooney was.
George Clooney. But weren't they long time? Isn't Clooney a major supporter, a friend even?
Exactly. That's what makes it stand out, needing multiple reminders about someone that well-known and supposedly close.
Yeah, that does seem surprising. And the article mentions Clooney's own reaction.
It does. Clooney apparently described Biden, using the reported Dutch phrase, as a brick-bear reward man. Basically, fragile and confused.
Fragile and confused. That's strong.
Especially, as Clooney reportedly noted, compared to the Biden he knew years earlier. It wasn't just a passing comment either.
Oh.
The article connects this observation to an op-ed Clooney wrote for the New York Times. This was after Biden dropped out of the race, following that debate with Trump that the article calls rampanselig disastrous.
Right. I remember that debate being widely seen as difficult.
And in that op-ed, Clooney apparently reiterated this feeling, saying the Biden he saw at the fundraiser wasn't the same person he'd known. Coming from a longtime ally, that's, well, significant.
Well, absolutely. That's a very personal, potentially damaging observation to make public. But the article suggests it wasn't just Clooney or just that one event. Were there broader concerns mentioned?
Yeah, it seems so. The article mentions eyewitness accounts describing Biden's day-to-day condition.
And how did they describe it?
The term reported is bina ketatonisch, almost catatonic.
Catatonic.
Yeah.
That's a very serious description.
It is. It implies issues like fluctuating muscle tone, strange movements, a lack of responsiveness, really concerning stuff.
Wow. Any other descriptions like that?
There's another quote mentioned from an unnamed Hollywood guest at some event. They apparently found watching Biden beängstigend, frightening.
Frightening.
And like watching iemand die niet meer was, someone who's no longer there.
Gosh, those are heavy words, not just slowing down, but no longer there.
Exactly. These aren't mild observations.
And it sounds like these worries weren't just about public perception, but maybe practical concerns too. Something about a wheelchair.
Right. The article claims that some staff and advisors were worried that if reelected, Biden might actually need to use a wheelchair at some point.
So internally, there was that level of concern about his physical state?
That's what's suggested, which makes the external messaging seem, well, potentially quite different.
How so?
Because, according to the article, journalists were being told, often in private briefings, that Biden was actually besonder scherpzinnig, exceptionally sharp-witted.
Exceptionally sharp. So a real disconnect between those internal worries and the public or even semi-private narrative.
That seems to be the implication the book makes, based on this summary. A deliberate effort, perhaps, to manage perceptions.
And were those private meetings where he was supposedly sharp actually spontaneous?
Well, the article claims those meetings were often volleydig-script, fully scripted.
Fully scripted, even private ones with advisors or visitors, not just press events.
That's the assertion reported. It does make you wonder about the opportunity for, genuine, unscripted interaction or assessment.
And the article also mentions specific instances of memory lapses. Forgetting names.
Yes. It reportedly cites examples like Biden forgetting the names of very close long-term aides, people like Mike Donnellan, Kate Bedingfield, even ministers.
Forgetting his own key staff.
That's the claim. And also confusing states, mixing up Texas and Alabama, for instance.
With those kinds of specific examples, if true, they do add weight to the overall claim of a decline, don't they?
They certainly paint a more detailed picture than just general statements. They suggest cognitive challenges beyond, say, the occasional slip of the tongue.
Definitely concerning claims. Now, the book apparently doesn't stop at Biden himself. It looks at his inner circle, too. The article used a really loaded term, Politburo.
Yeah, that's a term that definitely jumps out, Politburo. It's obviously drawing a direct parallel to the closed top leadership group in the old Soviet Union.
So what's the implication of using that specific comparison?
The authors, according to the article, seem to be using it to suggest an environment of extreme control, secrecy almost, shielding the leader, maybe controlling information, and potentially denying or shutting down uncomfortable truths about his condition.
An inner circle operating with that level of control and perhaps denial.
That's the picture painted. Very insular.
And the article mentions someone specific, Anthony Bernal, an advisor to Jill Biden, enforcing this.
Yes. There's a reported instance where Bernal allegedly stopped discussion about Biden's mental fitness by saying something like, Jill got dit niet Luke vinden. Jill isn't going to like this.
Wow. So invoking the First Lady's disapproval to end the conversation.
It suggests a certain dynamic, doesn't it? A clear signal that such topics were off limits, potentially because of how the First Lady might react. A strong protective shield.
And Jill Biden herself, how is she portrayed in this narrative?
The article describes her as fiercely protective, an onverzettelijke Bershmer, an unwavering protector.
Unwavering.
And it suggests she actively worked to dismiss concerns, even when they came from, say, major donors who apparently thought he shouldn't run again.
So loyalty potentially overriding maybe more objective concerns about his fitness for the job.
That seems to be the angle presented in the book summary. It raises that difficult question about the balance between personal loyalty, spousal support, and the demands of the presidency. Did that fierce protection perhaps prevent a clearer assessment?
The tough question indeed. So we have this alleged pattern, concerns about fitness, a tightly controlled inner circle, denial. What does the book claim were the bigger consequences of all this? The article used the phrase wegkijken, stilzwijgen politiklavheid. Looking away, silence, political cowardice.
Right. The reported argument in Original Sin is that this collective behavior within the Democratic Party, this looking away, this silence, actually contributed to Donald Trump winning the subsequent election.
How so? What's the connection they're making?
The implication seems to be that by not confronting these issues head-on, by downplaying the reality of Biden's condition as the book portrays it, the party was maybe unprepared or presented a weaker front, ultimately leading to defeat. A kind of strategic failure born from denial.
A failure to face reality with major political consequences. That's the argument.
That appears to be the core thesis regarding the political fallout.
Now, the book itself, and particularly Jake Tapper, haven't escaped criticism since this news broke, right? The article mentions Fox News weighing in.
Yes, there's definitely been pushback. Fox News, according to the article, has pointed fingers back at Tapper and CNN.
What's their argument?
They're essentially saying, wait a minute, weren't you guys part of the media that defended Biden before? Didn't you downplay these exact same concerns when others raised them, calling them conspiracy theories?
So accusing Tapper of hypocrisy, basically.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Suggesting that maybe CNN and others were hesitant to report critically on Biden's fitness earlier because they feared a Trump victory more. It raises that whole complex issue of media objectivity in highly polarized times.
It's always complicated when the reporters become part of the story. But the article also makes a point about what the book isn't claiming. It's not alleging huge conspiracies.
Correct. That's an important distinction the article makes. It says the book doesn't contain spectacular complotten of Chandelin. No spectacular plots or scandals.
So no hidden bombshells in that sense.
Apparently not. The focus, as reported, is much more on what the authors see as a peinlijk patroon, a painful pattern.
A pattern of what?
Of denial. Of ignoring the signs of decline. It's framed less as a conspiracy and more as a collective, perhaps understandable but ultimately damaging, failure to confront a difficult reality.
Okay. So the overall tone seems to be one of maybe disappointment or highlighting a systemic issue rather than a single shocking event.
Based on the summary, yes. Painful pattern suggests a focus on the consequences of that alleged denial and lack of political courage.
Right, so let's try and wrap this up for everyone listening. We've gone through the key claims reported about original sin.
Yeah, the central argument about Biden's fitness to run.
Those specific, striking examples, the Clooney incident, the catatonic descriptions, the forgotten names.
The portrayal of the inner circle as that controlling Politburo, shielding him, with Joe Biden as a key protector.
And the alleged consequences contributing to Trump's win, plus the media reaction to the book itself, like the Fox News criticism of Tapper.
And crucially, that it's presented not as some grand scandal, but as this painful pattern of looking away.
Exactly. So you came here hoping for a clear, concise rundown of this major story without getting bogged down. Hopefully this deep dive into the news report on original sin delivered that for you.
It certainly gives a lot to think about. And it does lead you to wonder, doesn't it? Thinking beyond this specific situation.
What's that?
Well, considering everything laid out in this report, what are the longer-term implications? For any leader, really, when questions about health or capacity arise, what's the responsibility of those around them?
The advisors, the family, the party.
Yeah. What are the ethics involved? Where does loyalty end and maybe a different kind of duty begin? There are no easy answers, obviously.
No, definitely not. But it's a really important question to reflect on, something for you to consider.